Good early evening, everybody. This is Changemakers on the Be the Change Network. We are very excited to have a special guest this evening, Kevin McNeil. He worked on the Special Victims Unit, and at that point with the police force realized that he had much more to give to this country and to the world around him and to his community, and learned that he could actually make just as big of an impact as a police officer by finding a way to helping victims and be an advocate. He has a great story, and we'll be beginning in just a minute or two. So please share this out there. I know we got a little bit of an early start today, so make sure you share it out now and your friends can watch it later if they're not going to be able to watch live. Again, this is hosted by me, which is Anthony Russo, and of course, Lee Kelly, and Kevin McNeil is today's special guest. So thank you for joining us, and we'll begin in just a minute here with Changemakers. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anthony Michael Russo from #BeTheChange. Give you guys a heads up. This is episode number 2 of Changemakers. For those of you joining us on our podcast, welcome. This is the second episode of this. We, of course, also have Truth Will Set You Free. If you're joining us right now, please be sure to check out our podcast at #BeTheChange.com/podcast. You can get it in all the different formats there. You can check out Truth Will Set You Free. Sum of All Parts coming soon. It's there. It's ready. Cash and I will have a little chit-chat about that a little bit later. And then, of course, this will be on as well. Our last episode was with Daryl Davis. That is already live, so be sure you also check that out as well. If you would like to watch us on YouTube instead of Facebook, because as we know, Facebook has sometimes been glitchy lately, here is our YouTube channel. Essentially, just look up Be The Change USA. You go to youtube.com/C/BeTheChange USA. And throughout the show, I'm going to go ahead and keep this scrolling on the bottom. If you'd like to support our program at Be The Change, we do have a Patreon set up at patreon.com/BeTheChange. But with that said, it is time to introduce the co-host of this week's Changemakers, Mr. Lee Kelly.
Well, hey there, everybody. What's up, Rusey?
What's going on, brother? How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing good. Had a lot of interesting conversation today, actually. I'm going to talk to you about it after the show. It was really good, and you would have been proud of me.
I saw a couple videos. I saw that some of them might be frustrated. Or you might be frustrated. The last comment you said when you laughed it off, like, does that sound white?
Yeah, my white opinion.
That was my white opinion. That was actually pretty funny. The great part about this show, Changemakers, is we get to just actually bring people on the show that are creating change in their community, in the world around them, and doing big things. And we've got a really cool guest, Kevin McNeil. You might have seen him on Truth Will Set You Free about a month and a half ago. Cash, you remember when he was on, correct?
Yes,
the ex-police officer?
Fantastic human being, straight up. I love the guy.
So what was great about him and his backstory, we were kind of using him to get questions about policing, but at the same time, his backstory is so good to listen to and see why he does what he does today. So we're going to go ahead and introduce him. We're going to bring him up, and we're going to give him the floor because ultimately, Changemakers is there to show people that are creating change because we want to create this kind of change to be viral. We're showing these good stories, these great stories of people creating change so that people can actually be inspired to create the change they wish to see in the world. So while you guys are in the box right now, in the comment box, share this out there. Make sure, get in the box. What's in the box?
What's in the box?
Oh, it's cutting out on YouTube. That's a new one. Well, who knows? Anyways, thank you guys. So put in the comment box where you guys are from and also start sharing it out there. Because, again, today's a little bit of an early start. So hopefully you guys will be able to share it so people can see it later. So with yes, Cash?
The shadow ban is real right now, bro.
I know. I'm watching that. It's super
serious.
weird.
Dead serious. Even on mine today. But when I got done, it said that I had over 4,000 people. Yeah. I'm telling you, it didn't go over like 200-300. And then when I was done, I had 4,000 views. I'm telling you, they're trying to discourage us from going live. I feel like that's what's going on here.
No.
Everybody, if you could, please share this if you haven't already. Share this for us, and we need to test this theory because we feel like we're getting shadow banned. So please, if you could, if you haven't already, share this video. Let everybody know to like the Be the Change page. And I'm pretty sure you already like the Streetlights page, but thank you in advance for doing it because I know you guys do because you're loyal Streetlights. I appreciate you and Be the Change Makers.
I see what you did there. And the great thing about sharing this is if any of you guys out there are afraid of sharing things that are polarizing or difficult, this is not that show. You can literally share this no matter what your political beliefs are, no matter what your friends are like, because this is a positivity type show. There is no fear in sharing this. I promise you. Cash has a muzzle. We will keep any heavy political conversation out of this show.
You're very muffled, by the way, Anthony. I don't know if it's your mic or what, but you are very muffled.
I'm muffled?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm good to know that. How about now? Is that better?
No.
No, not at all?
Sounds like you're talking to us through a can.
Man, I got a new mic and everything because my dog broke the other one. How's this?
Say it again.
Crappy? How's this?
It's a little better, but it just sounds just like you're talking through a can.
Well, you sound like straight butter. So guess what? You're going to be leading this interview with Mr. Kevin McNeil. So
hey, no further ado, you know, I'm not shy in the spotlight.
All right, let's go ahead and introduce Mr. Kevin McNeil to the stage. Kevin, what's going on?
How you doing, man? Thank you all for having me. What's up, Kelly? Thank you. Ain't too much, man. Thank you, Anthony, for having me on, man. It's so exciting to see you two positive brothers doing great work in the world, man. Thank y'all for having me.
Thank you.
Did you see that?
Appreciate you.
He called me a brother. I'm
yes. Yeah.
I'm in. I'm in.
So brother number one, yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and Kevin, I'm going to let you take the floor. Go ahead and first tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now, and then Cash will go back and forth with you, and I'll let my muffled mic sit in the background.
Yeah, I'm working on my new book, Cry from Heaven. I'm doing this book. It's a fiction book, but I deal with it, and I deal with a lot of controversial issues in it. And what I deal with it is about an investigative reporter, he's African-American male, and instead of reporting on what's normal in the community, pointing the finger at government and policing, he actually takes aim at the African-American community and hold them responsible for their own healing and for their own progress. And so as a result of that, this reporter, he gets a lot of, flack from his family, his friends. And so he has to make this decision, what does he do? Coming from a background where he has overcome a lot of things in his life and he wanted to be positive. And so he didn't want to wait to be this person who was pointing fingers and blaming the media, blaming the government, blaming the white man. So as an investigative reporter, he started going back and started talking about the history of African-American in America and how most of the times we're pointing fingers and talking about, slavery in a negative sense, but also talking about how can we heal from it. It's our responsibility to take what happened to us and heal from it and make the world a better place in our involvement and our contribution to the world, and not denying what happened, but actually, taking what happened and making it into a positive thing. Basically what my life is about. And so that book I look forward to presenting to the world. It's called A Cry from Heaven because I want to indicate and I want to emphasize that God makes us play a role in the world that we want, right? God is crying out to us. Oftentimes we cry out to God for help, but now God's crying us to help ourselves and bring positive change into the world. So we can't do it by blaming others. We can't do it by, having a pity party or playing the victim. We have to take participation in the change that we want to see in the world. Yeah, so that's what I'm working on currently. And I'm doing a couple of, workshops. I'm speaking nationally. Everything has been shifted to my home because of COVID-19. So I no longer travel as much as I do, but I'm still active in the community and making sure that people hear about healing and what it takes to heal from abusive. Life is about challenges. And so I want to help people and motivate people through their struggles and not just, blaming external circumstances, but healing them from the inside and then allowing what's on the inside of you to cause change and on the world on the outside. So yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. I'm excited about it, and look forward to sharing it with the world.
I'm excited for you. Honestly, that sounds very, very interesting, and I love the title.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. Yeah.
I'm excited about that. Let me know when you drop it, because I'm definitely going to share it, and I would love to get a copy.
Definitely. I definitely send you both a signed copy. Yeah. So hopefully I'll drop it next year. Like I said, it's going to be a bunch of controversial stuff in there, but it's going to be dealing with topics that we have to address and not just sweep up under the rug and put on the back burner. It's some things that, because I believe that change is about impact. It's not about talking about change.
Definitely.
You have to do something to change the world. And the rest of my life, the rest of my days here, I want to leave something, as a detective, former detective. One of the things that we looked for if a person was ever on the scene is evidence. Will there be evidence that you will ever hear? All right. So, I don't want to live this life and there not be any evidence that Kevin McNeil existed and made a positive change in the world for the future generations that to come, And I love what Barack Obama said, something that was very significant. He said the things and the choices that we're making today is for the children that are not even born yet. And that was, that hit me like, wow.
I love when he used to speak. I ain't gonna lie. Like I would get chills listening to Obama speak. He said a lot of impactful things, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's basically, my goal when I wake up, my intention at night. I set an intention when I get up in the morning, I need to bring some change in the world. I need to do something that brings a positive change. I don't need to agitate people's fears and angers. Everybody's angry about something, And I often tell people that anger that's not dealt with turns into depression, or it turns into bitterness and hatred. And so that in a lot of things that I really do, I want to help people understand that you can listen to people with different point of views and learn from them. One of my favorite shows on Netflix is Shameless.
Yes.
Yeah, my favorite character is Frank, right? Frank is this guy, this narcissistic drunk, but he says so many deep things, right? So if you judge Frank, you're going to miss some deep things he said. And that I love that show because it makes a valid point. When you judge people, you can't hear them, right? And they can say some of the most profound things that can change your life. But if you're too busy judging them based on outward appearances and something you disagree with, you may end up missing some caveats and some nuggets that can help you bring the change that you desire to bring into the world. So yeah, I love that.
I like it. So you're a definite change maker, is what I just heard.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, Frank, my dude, man.
I have a whole philosophy about that whole concept, like him from Shameless. The packaging doesn't always matter. It's the gift on the inside, and sometimes the packaging on the outside brings a gift that's trash on the inside. So sometimes you get the messages from the
woman with the horrible attitude.
Yeah.
Exactly, Cash. Spot on.
Speaking of Shameless, before you go, I just got to throw this in real quick. Shameless always reminded me of my family.
Oh, wow, really? Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, I think that's why I like it too. It's one of those things where they take the bad and they make it do. Make it do what it do. I like that.
Well, when I started Be the Change, it's like what you said. It's we talk about change and we don't actually do actually commit ourselves to change. Yeah. So that's why I really, really liked your story. And before we get back to kind of where you got from and where you started, the 12 project is what you're working on also. I mean, obviously with COVID, there's not a lot of speaking going on right now. As you and I both know, we're motivational speakers. There's not much going on. Let's start with what is the purpose of the 12 project? And then I know that relates to your growing up, your childhood and everything that got you there. But what is the 12 project?
Yeah, the purpose of the 12 project is bringing healing into the world through abuse education. A lot of times we deal with symptoms of abuse and not the root problem that abuse causes. And so a lot of times what we see in our culture, violence and hatred and all these other things are just symptoms of a bigger problem. We deal with the branches and not the root, right? And so if you want to produce fruit, plant a seed, bury it, right? So when you bury trauma, you produce fruits from trauma, right? Because you buried it deep into the ground. You don't want to discuss it. And so a lot of the times we try to spray the fruit or pick the fruit. And then when we don't like how the fruit tastes, we complain about the fruit. When it's not the fruit, it's the seed you planted. So years ago, as a young boy walking home from school, 12 years old, I was kidnapped and raped by a man that I never knew. And once he got done raping me, he tried to kill me. And at 12 years old, I had to fight this guy off, and I ran all the way home. Got home, no shirt, no shoes. I was blood and mud on me. And my mom looked at me, and I told her I was robbed because I was too shameful as a male to say that my virginity had been taken by a man. And so I told my mom that I was, robbed, and they took my tennis shoes, my shirt. And growing up in Memphis, in the type of neighborhood I grew up in, it was not unbelievable. She wanted to call the police, but I knew instinctively if the police came, they were going to get the truth out of me. They would have known, who wants something from a 12-year-old little boy. So I lied, and I lived with that trauma. My mom didn't call the police. She respected my decision not to report it. And I lived with that secret for 30 some odd years. But little did I know, although I got up off the ground and I survived the incident, there was some things that came along with that trauma. I always tell people my assailant got away, but his accomplice followed me home, which was trauma, right? And I had to deal with that the rest of my life. Alcohol addiction, sexual addiction, choices and behavior decisions that I'm not proud of today. But once I learned about how trauma affected my brain and how it affected my decision making, my view of the world, it helped me become empowered to not just impulsively respond to those decisions, but to actually take control and power over those decisions and choices that I was making. That I wasn't a bad person, something bad happened to me. And so one of the things that I did, I hid for most of my life. I didn't know that's what I was doing, but that's what I was doing. I played football as a young person, hid in uniform, left football in high school, joined the military, got out of the military, became a police officer. So I was using uniforms to conceal my identity because I wanted people to see the outside of me and not see the pain that I was going through. So as a result of that, I learned about trauma while I was being invited, this opportunity that I had as a police officer, being invited to people's homes and seeing the pain that was associated. And there was a common theme once I became a special victim detective. As a police officer, I was seeing people getting their brains blown out, seeing robbed and raped. And I was just asking this question. I was like Marvin Gaye, like, what's going on? Coaching our society, And so once I became a special victim detective, I saw the roots of it. I started investigating crimes against children. And I started seeing these same children who wasn't getting the help that they needed, and how parents, although they were offered services, didn't think the services were important, and their children were growing up with this trauma, and they started doing things and making choices like I had, and I was lucky. And so the trouble they were getting into wasn't really, them, and I'm not taking responsibility for the choice and decision, but it was something behind it. And being a detective allowed me to see that. And I started researching, I started studying trauma, I started going to conferences, I started doing everything I could to learn about how trauma affects the brain. And what I started seeing, particularly in the African-American community, and that's the community that I'm from, so I was more familiar with it, I started seeing that we had adopted some of these practices that we complain about. We had taken some of the slave masters' methodology of controlling slaves, and we started putting some of those same methodologies and disciplining our children by beating them and things of that nature. And so it was causing some things relating to trauma as well. So I went back to my police department and told them, hey, we need to do more on the preventive end. We need to do more on the progressive end. We don't just need to respond to abuse. We need to try to figure out how we can get this stuff out of the courtrooms and bring them into people's living rooms. We need to teach better, parenting and community involvement. But they told me basically that we pay you to lock people up and not care for victims. It wasn't those many words, but I understood that premise. Like, all the cases that I had, I was a senior detective, and I was going around the country speaking on abuse. It took me out the office. So I started the 12 Project. I was reading scripture one day, and I saw where he summoned the disciples. And it amazed me. As much as I looked at the Bible and went to church as a young boy, no one brought this up. And it said Jesus summoned the 12, and he gave them power over abusive spirits. He gave them power over the world in which they encountered, so it wasn't that they was trying to change. They changed people, and people changed the world. And I was like, wow, that's deep. Like the 12 disciples goal wasn't to preach and to make people happy and get people to heaven. Their goal was to bring healing and change into the world. And that was the summons, and that was the mandate. Somehow we missed it. And so that's why I named it the 12 Project, because that's what I believe God calls each of us.
I love that.
Yeah, So, and 12 is the age that I was raped, and so I overcame that at the age of 12. And 12 is also symbolic for justice. You have 12 people in a jury, 12 hours in a day. right? You have 12 months in a year. So it's symbolic for renewal and
cranial nerves in your brain.
Exactly. 12, you know what I'm saying? You get that vagus nerve with those 12 cranial, that's connecting brain and body. And so I named it the 12 Project for that specific reason, because I believe we all play a role. And to complain about what's wrong with the world and not do anything to fix it, you're part of the problem and not the solution. So
so
yeah.
real. It's so real, straight up. You know, the last time you and I had spoke, you had gave me a lot to think about.
Yes, sir.
A whole lot to think about, because I'm not going to bring it up right now, and we're not going to talk about it right now because I already talked about it and it was hard to talk about. But I shared my story, man.
I appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
Blessings.
So thank you.
Yes, sir. Blessings to you, man. Because that's my goal. There are a lot of people. I think people think vulnerability is a weakness, but it's actually a strength, right? Once you can become vulnerable and express who you are, including some of the things that you struggle with and your pain, you open up a whole nother world for people who are struggling with some of the same things and possibly been, reluctant to share that. I spoke in a church one time, and I was invited. The church was doing some educational healing and abuse. It was one of those things where they did it just to help me include it, but it was really about theology and religion, and they just wanted to have me as a sideshow to say, hey, we're gonna bring this guy in and talk about child abuse or whatever. So I was on the stage and I was talking about some of the stuff we talked about, and after the session it was Q&A. I was sitting beside two doctors of theology and religion, and every single question was aimed at me, right? So one lady stood up and she started crying. And she said, you just explained my whole life in 30 minutes. And she was just boo-hooing. And she was like, now I understand why I did the things that I did, why I made the choices that I made. And that hit me like, oh, man, I was like, oh, man. And so that was part of the reason I stopped. I resigned from my job, man. I gave them my gun and my badge. And I said, hey, you know what? There are other young people who can do this job. But for me, I want to go out into the world and bring the change that I want to see. And, I want to help other police officers who are still doing the work understand the nature of the work and not just do the work, So I wanted to make the police department better and the officers better. And that's one of those professions I think people don't understand, that we respond to trauma every day, and yet no one deals with our trauma.
Exactly.
And so people are hard on police officers, but they don't understand that's the hardest job in the world, and yet the system doesn't provide for them counseling, doesn't provide for them space to discuss what they feel and how they respond to incidents and accidents, and so that's part of my goal too. It's not just dealing with abuse from the public, but also dealing with from service care providers, so that's part of my mission and the 12 Project's mission.
So question for you, a couple people asked how they could help out with the 12 Project, and then I'm going to ask another question of how you kind of got into policing all the way from the start. So how can I have the website up? How can people help your mission or get involved?
Yeah, they can just go to my 12 Project page and they can go into the messaging. Just contact me or my assistant and tell us how they want to help out. Or one of the things I decided to do, and I decided this early this year, I'm putting out videos, motivational videos and educational videos on a platform. And I'm going to make it free. And the reason I want to make it free, I don't want there to be any obstacles to the information that I believe God has blessed me with. I've been totally blessed to be here speaking with you. There's more things that have happened to me throughout my life. Got involved in a shootout and almost was killed during an encounter with some guys who committed a murder. So to be here is a miracle. And so I believe in that same scripture where I talked about Jesus called the 12 disciples, there's a scripture in Matthew 10:8 that says, you have freely received, so freely give. And so I want to make sure that the information that I have, the wisdom that God has given me through the experiences that I've experienced, I want to make sure it's not hindered in any form or any way. So I don't want people who don't have money for subscriptions or whatever to do. So I'm going to make it totally free. And one of the ways I will support that mission is have a page up for they can donate. money if they choose to, people who can afford to donate. But I want to bring this information out of it because they talk about this in the classroom, they talk about it in the courtrooms. The science behind this is well known, but most people that it affects the most don't know the information. So I want to bring this out of the classroom, the courtrooms, into people's living rooms. I want to do that through the 12 Project, so people can help with that mission by going to my page, liking my page, and staying tuned for information to the link to those courses. They can share those courses.
Sounds good. So stay up to date with 12 Project. We'll keep sharing as you have new stuff on your page. We'll share it up so people can see it.
Thank you.
This is a question that I'm really interested in how you start out with is how do you overcome the traumas from Nicole? Do you have anything specific you recommend to treat trauma for a 13-year-old?
Wow, I say listen, right? So a lot of times trauma victims are judged, right? You'll see a shift in behaviors. Like for me, I went from a kid who was bullied and used to cry when I was bullied and, used to walk away and run away, but after I was traumatized and that happened to me, I started acting out. I started fighting. I started becoming very violent. I was very angry. I was a very angry kid. My grades went from A's and B's to D's and F, right? The only way I made C's was because I wanted to play football. And in Tennessee, they had no pass, no play, right? You have to make a C average to play sports. And so, but my behavior changed drastically. But I was judged, right? They said I was a bad kid. And really, I was making an outcry. I was trying to communicate through my behavior. But oftentimes, going back to that external outlook, how we judge and hear. It's hard to love and hear what you judge, right? Even yourself. If you judge yourself, it's hard for you to love and hear your own spirit, your own voice. And so for a 13-year-old, look at the behaviors, right? And provide an open space and environment where the person can be honest and vulnerable and communicate how they feel. Because a lot of times trauma, the pain can lead to anger. It can lead to sadness. It can lead to depression. And it causes us to make choices and decisions that are not the wisest, but it's our way of coping, right? And so it can come in the form of many ways. For me, it was sexual addiction, alcohol addiction. But it can come in the form of many ways. And the way I dealt with it, to be honest with you, just like I coped until I became knowledgeable about trauma and what it did to me, my brain. But before I had that knowledge, I coped. I did as best I could, and I still have people, friends, and family members who I know personally who've gone through similar experiences that I have, and they're addicted to drugs, alcohol. But now I understand, right? I can really sit with them and listen, right? Rather than say, stop drinking alcohol. You know what you get. I got it when I went to church. Stop sinning, stop going out, stop sleeping around, stop drinking alcohol, and they beat it in, stop. But nobody understood the coping mechanisms that I was using to overcome that trauma. So one of the things that helped me tremendously was the education. That's why I'm so big on education. And that's why I want to provide this information for free. Because when people understand, even young kids, I found when I go to high schools and kids, they won't say they were abused, right? But if you give them experiences and tell them stories, they'll go, whoa, that makes sense. Like, and they'll come up to you afterwards, be like, I want to get better. How can I get better? I don't want to do these things that I do, but what you said makes sense, And so, so I want to bring this education into the world, and that's why I'm so big on education. So I would advise that person, find out what you can about trauma. Go to websites like my there are other websites out there, and just learn about adverse childhood experiences. That's one thing you can Google. It's called ACEs for short, and it'll tell you some of the things to look out for, some of the things you can do to help. But one of the biggest things I would say is provide a space and an environment that's conducive to being heard and to healing.
Yeah, I gotta throw this out there real quick.
Yeah.
You remind me a lot or I see a lot of myself in you. Like you're older, more put together me as far as like when I hear you speaking things. But one thing right now, I got to bring it back to this part of it is you just said, there's other websites out there. Yeah, there is. But bro, you have a lot of knowledge and you're sincere. And I know you don't want to make this thing about the money and all that. That's why you're putting it up for free. And I get all that. Yeah. But I want to encourage everybody, don't go to no other website. Go to his website, because if there's a man that is deserving of this type of platform and to be doing this type of work, I feel like it's him. He's been in in a messed up situation from a kid into wanting to be the change, dealing with his own trauma, becoming a police officer to help make that change, then to not being a police officer and doing the work that he's doing now. So don't use no other website. Go to his website, and if you have the means to be able to donate, I know we don't want to make it about money. I say the exact same thing as him. Like, I don't want to make it about the money, but it does take money to do things.
It does.
Implement change. It does take funds. So if you are capable, if you have the means, please donate to this man. He deserves it. Straight up. And he's impacted a lot of lives, and he has already without the help. So any other help would be great. So I just had to throw that in there.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. Yeah, it does take money, because I want to bring the best possible information and use the best possible equipment to bring it forth, so people don't, I want the best mics, best cameras. So I want to provide the certain type of service that people deserve when it comes to this information. Nelson Mandela said something, that I love. He said, education is the most powerful tool you can use to change the world. Yeah. And I believe that. Education, really, the word educare, it means to draw out, to pull out. So that's everybody in the world has a gift, right? And if you educate them about themselves, the gift will manifest itself, right? And so a lot of times trauma and abuse hides us, from us. One of the lessons I'm working on is who told you were naked, right? How you see yourself will determine how you act in the world, how you see the world, how you respond to the world and others in the world, right? So with everything that's going on in the world, people are angry, people are making judgments there, but nobody wants to step forward and say, hey, how can we change this? How can we work together to change it? I may not have to agree with you, your point of view, but if I shut you down, I'm like Frank, if you judge the person because you don't agree with their views, you might miss an important opportunity to bring the change because it's happened to me. The people that you feel like you disagree with will be the people who could help you the most, right? So
I want to be part of whatever you got going on. Any way that I can help, let me know.
I appreciate that, guys. Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
I would love to talk later and figure out something, because I think with the key is, you said, safe space. And I used to, I'm sure Cash felt the same way when I heard like, I won't be in the safe space. I'd be like, okay, I'm not, that's some corny ass BS. You know what I mean? But it's not the safe space. Like, if you feel like yelling in the middle of your classroom, it's the safe space of being able to meet people like you and hear your story. And that's where the next question comes from. This is for both Cash and you, because what's important is
Nicole.
Making people feel comfortable to share their story. And nobody's going to go raise their hand in the back of a classroom and say, I'd like to speak to you because this has happened to me. They're going to come up to you afterwards. So it is something of, if we can get both of you guys together and some other people, and I know with Jeff Markinette, we do those Get Up conferences, but to do something specifically for abuse, and allow people to hear your story and then set up something special for them later to where we can have people directly talk to you guys. I think that'd be really important, and maybe even talk about, I do performance coaching, but I don't know if you do specific one-on-one counseling, but I think that'd be interesting as well.
Yeah, I can do that. And one of the things I tell people, I always use, metaphors and stories are powerful. I think sometimes we read stories, and I deal with a lot of Christians. Sometimes they read the creation story, and I say, I want you to pay attention that God created an environment before he created a human being, right? That tells you the significance of environment, right? Yeah. You have to create an environment for healthy human beings to dwell and thrive in. So if you create an abusive environment, you can put the best human being in it, and it's going to destroy them because they don't have what they need to grow. Same thing with a garden, right? You have to cultivate the ground, make sure the environment before you can plant the seed. And so safe environments are places where, because we don't live in an abusive, friendly culture, to be honest with you. As an African-American male, to say you were raped, man, that was, dude, they looked at you like, wow, dude, you didn't fight them off, right? They look at you like you judged, right? Like you're not hard enough, you're not a man, right? But, men have feelings too. I think we have enculturated emotions to be either female or male. Like males have emotions. You don't believe males have emotion? Watch a football game. Right? Watch them get emotional then. But we have said the male can't hurt. They can't be in pain. And what happens when you do that is that when you take power from someone, they find it in other forms, and it may be destructive forms. And so if you don't provide that space for us, and when I mean us, trauma victims, to say, I'm in pain, I need help. I need somebody to guide me and lead me and tell me how to deal with it. And not only just tell me, just listen, right? Because sometimes being able to talk about it is freeing within itself. And that's another thing, going back to the question I think Nicole asked. Once I started telling my story, it was like the trauma was leaving with every word, right? It's amazing. If you notice as children, we come out the womb, we can't stand, we can't talk, but boy, we can cry, right? That voice, your voice is an opportunity to let the trauma out. But you have to have a space to let your voice be heard. And so I'm real big on environment and space for that.
So this is the actual, and that perfectly leads into the question for both of you guys, because I think that's important, is telling that story. And Colleen asks, how did you find the strength to finally speak your truth? Because both of you guys, phenomenal speakers, you have the ability to relate to people. So it's important. And this whole show is about creating a ripple effect. And that ripple effect allows other people to tell that story. And as you just said, that sensation and that feeling of getting rid of the trauma starts with sharing. So what in the very beginning, start with you first, Kevin, what actually got you to finally be able to share?
Man, that's interesting. It was actually called upon. It wasn't intentional. I was in the office, and I'll tell people this story. God actually called me, literally. Like, I was in the office detective. I was the only one who used to work overtime, and all the other detectives stayed at the office because they knew the phone rang. You answered the phone, you were the one who worked the case. So they were very strategic about not remaining in the office. So I was in the office one day, and phone rang, and it was somebody from the district attorney's office, and they said, "Hey, our district attorney has double booked themselves. They can't go and train down in Forsyth, Georgia, where the nurses are waiting on them. Can someone from your office go?" And they said it's on the weekend, and you have to travel like 40 miles. I was like, well, ain't nobody here that's going to be willing to give up their weekend and go teach, for free. And so I was given to hang up the phone. They said, "What about you?" I was like, you didn't hear me say nobody? Like, ain't nobody go do that, right? And so I said, yeah, I do it. And I knew the type of person I was. I like to be a man of my word. And even though I didn't want to do it, so when I hung up the phone, I went home and I was like, man, I never taught a class in my life. What am I gonna talk about? And I said, you know what? I'm just gonna tell my story. I got up and told my story, and I saw all these tears in the room. I was like, whoa. And people were coming up to me afterwards, and they were sharing with me, I'm a victim too. And they never told before. And I was like, whoa, I saw the power in telling the story. And so for me, it was one of those things where I didn't know I was being set up. Right. So once I saw the effect that it had, man, it moved me to the point where I came home and I was like, man, that felt good. But what made it feel good was the other people being able to tell their stories as well. So the first time I shared my story opened up a whole door for other people to share their stories. So that's how mine happened.
And Cash, you haven't shared for the bulk of your life, and you just started opening up. So what was the catalyst for you?
Well, you've seen all the stuff that was going on with the whole, the Epstein stuff, and then people started, speaking out about traumas, and then having the talk that we had with him and listening to him. I'm sure you probably didn't know that I was internalizing it the way that I was internalizing it when you were giving it for the first time, but I was thinking about it like, damn, I can't believe he actually, talked about it to everybody open the way that you did. Yeah. And what really did it was John Tisha, she told me that she was doing a show, or Nikki told me that John Tisha was doing a show, and I talked to John Tisha, she told me about it, and she told me about this woman that wanted to speak out, but, she was afraid to, and she was a street light, and, she was scared. So I'm like, you know what? I'll do it. I'll talk about it. But I told myself I'm not going to talk about one trauma that happened to me. I'll talk about the other trauma that happened to me, because this trauma that happened to me was with a woman. So it don't make me, look like how it's going to make me look if I talk about what happened to me when it was a dude. So when I was on the show with her, I was talking about the trauma that happened with the female. And then I thought about Joe, and I'm like, you know what? She's watching right now. And I promised her that I would, I'd do it for her. So I just sucked it up and very uncomfortably told my story.
Yeah.
And it's still tough. I don't even like thinking about it,
Yeah.
Makes my nerves get bad. Like,
Yeah.
But I did, you know what I'm saying? And I talked about it. And yeah, after that, I ain't gonna lie. Like I got the courage up to talk about it, but I literally like I didn't respond to nobody's messages, no text messages, no comments on Facebook. I had like, I don't know, it brought some stuff up in me. Like I got emotional and all that stuff, and I had to sit down for a little bit. And even right now, you know, it's like I don't even like talking about it. But it I just did it for other people, you know what I'm saying? So that people feel safe to be able to talk about their stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking at all the comments, and what's interesting is I think one of the biggest things with the importance of sharing the story is the biggest fear we have is being alone.
Yeah.
And knowing that there is other strong people like both of you, like people in the comments that have had this happen to them, sharing that gets that out and allows them to, as you said, Kevin, get it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And honestly, there's nothing more dangerous than being alone and hiding hiding it and suppressing it your whole life, allowing that to get out. So, I mean, there is a lot of people just commenting the same way.
Yeah. And it's the shame that comes along with it. That's why one of the first courses that I'm doing is who told you were naked, right? So shame is how we cover our nakedness and our vulnerabilities. And a lot of times what happens as a result of that, we separate ourselves or we become false selves. We try to pretend to be other people, to be liked. And so we try to fix up our external appearances by thinking that if we had more, we buy more materialistic things, we look better on the outside, will make us feel better on the inside. And it's actually the opposite around. You heal from the inside better. And then as a result of that, your outside appearances can become more authentic and you can communicate better because nothing thrives without a connection. Right? When you think about it, when you think about nature, a tree has to be connected to the ground and the limbs to the tree and the fruits to the limbs, right? So when you become disconnected from yourself, you can't produce fruit. You can't produce fruit in the world. So one of the greatest things about sharing is it brings about a connection to your pain. And one way I think pain is not, and problems are not to be run from or to be shied away from, but it's to be confronted and dealt with. That's where courage comes from. It comes from facing and confronting what you don't want to confront, even if it doesn't feel good. But that courage actually gives other people the courage to do the same thing. So that's why I'm so passionate about educating people and sharing my story, because I know that the statistics say that it happens more often than we're ready to admit. And oftentimes you don't hear it in the news. Right? You just see people responding and coping, using coping mechanisms. And I was a Christian, went to church for a long time. I was in leadership at the church, and no one dealt with this topic. Right? We were so busy telling people, talking at them and telling them stop doing behaviors that we didn't even understand why they did them. And we were doing more harm than good. Right? You can't plant seed in the hard ground. So no matter how much you stand on that stage and preach to people, if their hearts are not healed, the seeds you planted not even taking root, right? So I learned that too. Like, hey, we have to do more. We have to do more than just talk at people and tell them to stop, right? We have to become listeners of their pain and help them to listen to their own pain and become transformers that way. Because you're going to bring change in the world, you're going to have to start with yourself, and that's one of the hardest steps to take.
That's true. That's 100. I mean, that's the biggest thing. You can't change the world around you until you've grown internally as a person. Yeah. We're almost wrapped up. There's a couple, and I know that you can go kind of all day talking about steps of releasing trauma. But this was like a second question, follow up from how you first get it out there and how you feel better, but how can you help someone move past the trauma once they've talked to you about it? So say somebody's come to you, had a conversation, and they say, they've opened up to you. What's the second step?
Yeah, that's a very important question, because it's almost the analogy that a mentor used to mind. You don't want to operate on somebody and leave them on the table and don't sew them back up, right? So if someone tells you that pain, you have to give them, some follow-up measures to make sure that they can actually deal with it. Because once you expose it, so they were so used to burying it that they cope and they were able to survive it. So part of the way is you have to ask them to join a community. And they can't do it alone. You can't heal in isolation. You have to join a community. You have to get a therapist. And I know saying therapist is not really popular in today's culture, particularly in certain communities. But you have to find a community that talks about trauma, that's educated about trauma, and that can help support you in your recovery process. Because healing is a process; it's a journey. Once you tell, I'm not gonna lie to you, you'll feel better, but all the pain doesn't go away, right? And so. So that's the thing that I want to leave with you, that you have to be intentional and you have to be willing to go through the process and the journey, because your healing is your responsibility. And a lot of times victims don't like to hear that, but it's a hard thing to really hear. For me, I know how beneficial it is to be intentional and be responsible. And like me, I have bad days, right? But I don't beat myself up and judge myself because of the bad days. I understand it's a result of the recovery. Recovery doesn't look the same to everybody, and sometimes failure is a learning process. You can learn from your failures and your drawbacks. So I would say get involved in the community, get involved with shows like this where people are talking about positive things, to separate yourself from negative people. And because you're going to need all the positivity you can get, because once you share, that's the beginning of the healing process, but it's a journey, right? And so every journey to healing is covered with some obstacles and challenges. And so the more resilient you become, the more you're able to walk that path and get to your healing.
I like this. Janine says, unfortunately, you're going to have flashbacks, but just say, not today, Satan. I like that.
Yeah. Or replace that Satan with trauma, right? Yeah. And so not today trauma, you can say the drama, I'm not having that today, So even if you do, like me, just sit back and I said, wow, you come a long way. You've become a survivor. So now the goal is to thrive. And again, telling people to be responsible for their own healing. My battery was going dead. I don't know what happened. Okay.
Well, we're about to wrap. I got one more question for you, because I think this is very pertinent. His battery is dead. Looks like we're gonna wrap. We'll see if he can get back up. My thought. I want to end just talking about the kind of victim mentality, and I know. For a period of time, my mom went to a psychologist as well. And I feel like there is the psychologists that are there to allow you to feel your trauma. And then there's the psychologists that are there to get you past your trauma. And I think it's I don't know if it's difficult or hard to find those two kinds of people. Those two kinds of psychiatrists, but I think there's an importance in, once you've recognized it and once you've dealt with it, to find somebody that's going to push you out of it. And in this day and age, we see a world full of that victim mentality, and it's almost kind of a weird, process. So Kevin, if you want to end, we'll wrap up. Did you get the battery charged?
Yeah, for some reason I'm in Atlanta, so it's raining a lot. I don't know if I had a power outage or not. So
you're all good.
But like the person said, not today trauma. You can't have
it. Not today trauma. So the final question I have, and this is a personal one, is there a point where you just have to have that, you go from the coddling kind of acceptance and safe space to, all right, let's get through this together. Let's find a way to drop the victim mentality and move forward. And that could be for any trauma. It's not just abuse or sexual abuse. Yeah. It's poverty. It's all the things we go through in life. It's the traumas that lead to who we are as a person. So what are your opinions on that?
Yeah, I think we have to get rid of this victim mentality, because the victim says them, and you will never ever get better depending on them or think it's somebody else's responsibility for your healing. And so no matter what the trauma is, whether it be racism, poverty, a lot of people that I always tell people, you can give everybody advice, right? But only some people will use it and take it. Only seekers, those who are really wanting to bring change into their own lives, will be the ones who take your advice. And so one of the things I see, like I said, I got friends and family that struggle with some abuse issues. And one of the things that separates, because I used to feel guilty. I used to have survivor's guilt. Like, why is my life turning out so different than the people that I'm close to that may have gone through worse things than I have? And the one thing that's coming is I didn't stay in the victim mentality, right? I made choices and decisions, whether those choices and decisions was to cope, to join other organizations and talk about it, But the people who are still stuck are the ones who still hold on to that victim mentality. And I tell victims that, that's one thing you have to detach from and let go of, as hard as it is, because victimhood can become a badge of honor. Right? Look what happened to me. Look, poor me. And that can keep you in prison. And you don't want to stay there. You want to actually get out of that way. And that's why you got to hook up with people who are positive, who can hold you accountable and say, hey, I know that happened to you. I'm not saying I know what you feel, know what you're going through, but I do know ways that can help you improve your life. And these are some ways that I've done it. Not to say that these things will work for you, but you have to get in front of people and around people who are not stuck in that same victim mentality.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, I'm gonna wrap up, and I hope, Kevin, you get a chance to look in the comments afterwards, because there's a lot of great comments thanking you for being on the show. People not feeling so alone. Paul agreeing that he had to just get it out, and that heavy feeling goes away from his shoulders. So yeah, great comments. I hope you get a chance to actually look at those. Do you have any final words to pass on, and we'll go from you to Cash, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, I'll just say, for everybody, that the world we have, we can make it better. We don't have to look at what's happening now and say, oh, woe is the world, the world is ending. We have a responsibility and the accountability to make this world better for our children, those who are coming behind us. It's our responsibility. And so we can get to work, every single day, or we can complain about it. The choice is ours. If you want change, let's do it. Let's make it happen. Let's change the world.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Truly a pleasure. You are a change maker. Cash, what do you got to wrap?
Just want to say, man, to anybody who has, been through something, understand something that's very important. All right. You are not your thoughts.
Yeah.
All right. And for a long time, I was my thoughts. That's why I was so angry. That's why I was out there doing the things that I was doing, because I was the thoughts that I was having. You know what I'm saying? So understand that the thoughts that you have, they are not you. All right. That's an attack on you, on who you truly are. You feel me? It's attacking the true you, the one that's not scared, the one that knows that you are loved, that knows that you are important, knows that you are somebody, knows that you're worthy. You know what I'm saying? Don't deem yourself not worthy or not acceptable or whatever it is that you struggle with. You're more than all of that. All right. And you can overcome anything. Nothing can break you unless you let it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Also, man, donate to that brother, man. Help his cause, because it's important. There's a lot of people out there with a lot of things that they're dealing with that they probably feel like they ain't got nobody to deal with it with them, and it's important. I'm telling you, you guys have no idea. Some of you do, some of you don't. It's important. So it's a good cause that he has going on right now. So I would appreciate it if you guys could share this and donate to his cause.
So
just support.
Yeah.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
And Ariel said, be the change. Please continue to mix platforms like this. Love this. And I think that's important. And obviously during the election cycle, we get really into making sure that we are talking about politics, etc. But these shows are important. This is the core concept of Streetlights and of Be the Change, is to actually create positive change in the world. And being able to bring more people in by doing stuff like this and having people accept a message that shows we may talk about politics in one direction, but at the same time, we also have an enormous amount of empathy to try to help and change people. It can change people's paradigm and thought process on people from all different ends of the political spectrum. So with that, I thank you guys for your time. Please, I'm going to throw up his page one more time. Kevin's page right here, 12 Project. If you haven't already, since again, we're trying to make sure that there's people watching on both YouTube and Facebook, make sure you follow the Be the Change YouTube page as well. If you like the merchandise we do, again, all this supports what we're doing. There is very little profit in anything we do. And actually, when I say little, I'm just trying to get out of the hole to make sure that we are covering all the costs of all of our different shows. So the Patreon link is below, and there are some special features in there where, depending on how much you donate or get to that, we'll have one-on-one Zoom calls and Zoom sessions and different stuff like that. So check that out as well. Cash, you know where his pages are, Streetlights Unity Movement. Make sure you follow that. A lot of the messaging between Be the Change and Streetlights is going to be very similar. Cash obviously has his page where we can get little bit more rant cash, which is a lot of fun. But we got to remember that the positivity has to shine through on our missions of creating change and being a change maker type society and creating ripples across the world and across the country as we see it. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for the show. We've got another change makers coming up again next week. Kevin, could not thank you enough. Thank you so much for being on.
I appreciate you.
Thank you, brothers, man. I love y'all both, man. Continue to change in the world that you're making. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, my man. Have a great day. Remember to subscribe, like, share, etc.